90% of the departments of whatever. Just lock them up. You know, states' rights. Did you know that a governor can declare war? Governor can declare war. Okay? And we're gonna probably see that.
That is Michael Flynn, who was the national security advisor to the former president, Donald Trump, which is very crazy when you think about it. It's crazy even if you don't think about it, but spare a little bit of thought, because he could be in our government again following 2024. We know that Trump feels a lot of loyalty for this guy who has spent the past couple of years, after all of his legal troubles that he brought onto himself, just routinely threatening mass violence. And there you have him not only saying that states can declare war, but that they soon will declare war, presumably on other states. Now, to be very clear, he's like 90% wrong there. According to the Constitution, no state shall blah, 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 a bunch of stuff, engage in war unless actually invaded or in such imminent danger as will not admit of delay. So that's, I guess, the facts. I don't think that's going to stop him or his ideological allies. But Caroline, what exactly would be the justification for one state to invade another state? I know we're gonna have to put ourselves mentally into the mind of Michael Flynn, but what do you think he's getting at there?
I have no idea. All that I can think is that, I don't know, there's like this tendency, in politics just in general, it's sort of widely known historically that if you have no policies to run on, no material interests for your people, like you just need to sow discord and basically like start a war kind of. And like I think that people like Michael Flynn, who have absolutely no interest, let's be clear, in helping the American people in any way, even like Republicans who love him, like they have no interest in delivering for these people on policy. All they can think of is in terms of violence. And we see it in these videos that keep emerging. And it really just is this escalating cycle of getting closer and closer to these people's like dreams of going to war. It's very weird, again, talking about the J.R. Majewski, the rapper MAGA Congress member, who is like obsessed with this idea of war and this idea of the Air Force and the military, but completely not understanding how many people are involved in the armed forces and how many of them will never see glory. They will see murder or they will see like logistics. So it's a profound misunderstanding of the material lives of most Americans. But I think it's really what these people, it's the only strategy in their tool belt to get support is just whipping people into a frenzy and scaring them, frankly.
I think we all understand at this point that a lot of Americans have become pretty radicalized and even more are worried about how partisan, how extreme, and how predisposed to violence our politics have become. But the polls demonstrating what people think about what's going to happen in America are getting even more radical at an amazing pace. So I want to jump into some of the results of a recent poll, summarizing a number of different things. The top line to focus on is that 2 in 5 Americans believe a civil war is at least somewhat likely in the US within the next decade. So like by the time the LA Olympics happen, we might be engaged in a civil war. That's what 40% of the country actually thinks. But they believe that other things are far more likely, that the US will no longer be a global superpower. I'm perfectly fine with that, don't really care. That there will be a total economic collapse. 47% of the country thinks that. Total economic collapse. Now, I don't know what each individual person, how they define that, but that is an extreme stance, and they think that it's coming. That there will be a civil war between people who are Republicans and Democrats. A very high percentage think that that's possible. That the US will no longer be a democracy. A total breakdown of law and order. I don't know what some people mean when they say those things, but this clearly shows that there's a lot of fear out there. And so what do they think the nature of this will be? Well, 40% think that there is likely to be a civil war. 32% think it's likely between red and blue states, as if, to define a state as red and blue defines truly what they are. No, there are blue people in red states and red people in blue states, and so that's going to be messy, I think. 30% think it's likely between the rich and the poor. 29% think it will be a race war. 20% think it's likely between people living in cities and rural areas. So depending on who you ask, they might be worried about a different sort of war, but many are worried about it in general.
When democracy fails in America, you got to ask yourself, who is the beneficiary of that? And it is right wingers. And that's a lot of that is systemically built into the system, so to speak, because of the Senate and weird old rules that we add to the Senate that make it less likely that the will of the people will make its way into action. Now, when I look at polls like this, I won't put it on anyone else. When I look at polls like this, you always ask what you think the person who's answering the polls is really being asked. A lot of them think, yeah, this is a question about whether I think the other side is crazy. So that is a portion of the people answering, yes, I think there will be a civil war. A lot of people aren't saying, I'm gonna fight it. They're like, those people are crazy, they're gonna fight it. So it's an inflated number. But when I look at the fundamentals, those ones that you listed, the first two are about like people buying firearms. A lot of that went in the wake of COVID was a result of a lot of economic uncertainty. And that was built into the fact that they weren't able to buy toilet paper. And when you're afraid you're not going to get toilet paper, you're afraid more of general lawlessness than you are of the need for a civil war to achieve an end. So I would write those off. But the rest of those really do make sense. When people are uncertain about democracy, about their own, about not just their beliefs, but generally like the will of the people making it into law. And when there's a lack of civility between the parties who are disagreeing, that is fertile ground for a movement that will end in a civil war, but also a strong leader looking at that and taking up the challenge to push us over the edge into that chaos. And as we saw play out these last few months of the January 6th riots, there were a lot of people who were like, oh, I was just kidding. Mark Meadows, I was going along with it. Kevin McCarthy, I was going along with it. But when it seemed like we were actually going into an insurrection, I, the leader that I am, literal leader in the title, Kevin McCarthy, was like, we're not gonna go into that. We're not gonna go over the edge into that. But they're not the ones fully in power. The checks and balances were able to check Trump, but he was fully willing, as we learned, to push us over the edge into that because he doesn't care about America, whether it's in practice or in promise. He doesn't care about any of it. He proved he only cared about himself, and sending his minions into armed combat proves that, and him ending up back in the White House and just willing to reap the benefits of the dissolution of American democracy. I mean, there is fertile ground for that to happen, which raises the likelihood someone's going to respond. Yes, it's likely to happen if they're informed about the situation. Couple that with the people who are on the edge of taking up arms, you got a big problem.